My siblings, please reach out your hands. Most High, we ask that I may speak with your voice, that we may hear. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. May Christ be with you.
And also with you.
A reading from the Good News according to the book of Luke.
Glory to you, O Christ.
The apostles said to Jesus, "Increase our faith." Jesus replied, "If you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your slave who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here at once and take your place at the table'? Would you not rather say, 'Prepare supper for me, put on your apron, serve me while I eat and drink. Later you may eat and drink'? Do you thank the slave for doing what was commanded? So you also, when you have done all you were ordered to do, say, 'We are worthless slaves. We have done only what we ought to have done.' This is the gospel of our Christ."
Praise to you, O Christ.
Does anybody see something not very Christ-like in the analogy Christ made there? Every time you see that, you have to wonder what really is being said. Because a lot of times, Jesus used hyperbole to make the opposite point from the one he was meaning to. He'd say something, but his point, his meaning behind it, was the opposite. There we go. That was English. Like, I'm not going to cast my treasure before dogs, when he was talking to the Samaritan, right? And he gave her the opportunity for the response that he could then agree with. So, in the same way here, we have the apostles saying to Jesus, "Increase our faith." And Jesus gives two responses. One is, if you had a little tiny bit of faith and you actually plant and nourish it, because remember, it's a seed, then you can say to the existence around you, "Change. The mulberry tree, go plant itself in the sea." And if you have that planted, growing faith, the reality around you will change. And I want to challenge you, if there are times in your life you have found that planted, growing faith, and you've looked at the reality around you that seemed so intractable and said, "I'm not tolerating this. I'm going to do something about it because my faith makes me grow and makes me move and makes me give shelter." Because mustard plants are actually fairly solid, fairly large shelters, and protects. And then we have the second one, which is calling out really callous use of an employee. That the same employee that works their butt off all day doesn't get a moment's rest and is told to push on. Now, Jesus is talking to the disciples, and this isn't how he treated them. He gave them rest. He gave them comfort. He also gave them challenge. He called them out. But this isn't how he treated them. This is a merciless using way of treating that slave. And it's being used in an analogy where the slaves are asking for their faith to be increased, which is more for their rest to be increased, right? So, probably this is not what Jesus was really trying to get at. I don't even know if the apostles were able to see themselves in the slave picture. we tend to be resistant to see ourselves as servants, right? And I don't think that slave's faith in the master would be improved by being worked so hard, so mercilessly. Can you at least sit down for a minute and get a drink of water? And Jesus did so much more than that for the apostles. And I think the model there is that we have to have faith that our God is going to treat us more like Jesus treats the apostles than like this master's treating the slave. Oh, look at me just assuming this is patriarchy, that it's a master is male. Huh. So when we're looking at these stories, think about what it's really teaching. Because if I was that slave, I wouldn't have faith in that master. It certainly wouldn't be a growing faith in that master, a faith that would grow strong enough to shelter others. I would instead think I needed to dawdle on my way back to the field so that I could, from the field, so that I could catch my breath. I might have to stop and soak my head at the well. I may have to grab some food before I go in and report to the master because I'm sure not going to get a break once I do. That's not a master I'm going to love serving. And it's not the way Jesus was with the apostles. And I'm dialing in here more than the other ones because it is the feast of St. Francis. And this struggle about how to see yourself as a servant of God is exactly what Francis struggled with. Francis had all the mercy and patience in the world most of the time for his Franciscans, and almost none of it for himself. He let his spirit rest. He did go take retreats, but I swear that's the only darn piece of self-care I see Francis giving himself. Again, redundant, you think. Uh, Clearly, I need to give a little more rest for myself, which is kind of funny because I just came off retreat. But here we are. When we're talking about how Francis treated the Franciscans versus how Francis treated himself, we're seeing that positive and negative use of the servant. That Francis absolutely saw himself as God's slave, as servant of a master, and absolutely saw his Franciscan siblings that way. But the mercy he showed them, he did not show himself. He actually died after a life, it wasn't that young for that period, but after a life of self-denial of the sort that was generally prescribed in that period, of hating your body and thinking that the physical interferes with the spiritual. And Francis's regret at the end of his life was that he should have been kinder to his own body. He wore himself out. And he did it regularly, and he was sick a lot because it was the only way his body got any rest. He actually called his body Brother Ass, Brother Donkey, Brother Annoying Work Beast of Burden that was always disappointing him. I wonder how much he disappointed his body. It's a challenge to extend grace to ourselves sometimes. And I can tell you in my own journey that there were a lot of years when I treated myself like St. Francis and not like Francis treated his siblings. And I got myself into some really negative situations by thinking I needed to take everything tossed at me and not take any care of me. And it took me a long time to understand that even as a Franciscan, I'm allowed a little gentleness. I'm allowed a little happiness. I'm allowed the occasional meal. Now, maybe I shouldn't turn into quite fire attack, but there's moderation. And Fairy Tuck might be a healthier model sometimes. out there with the people who actually needed him. And yes, loving to laugh and sing and eat. So as we're thinking about this gospel and we're thinking about Francis, I really encourage you to take the lesson of the end of his life and not the lesson of the rest of his life in this particular piece. Listen to how he treated other people, how patient he was with them, how kind he was with them, and the peace that he walked through life with. And follow that and grant a little peace to yourself, like he finally realized at the end. Not just for your spirit, but for all of you, because we are one whole integrated person. And that is the way of gentleness, and that is the way in which we can learn to trust ourselves. And if you think about it, that's exactly why we love God, right? Because we figured out that the God we serve isn't the God that other people talk about, but is love and patience and acceptance, and a cool drink of water, and a comforting place to get held. I revere God as deeply. I just don't think God is a mean old guy with a stick. And funny, but that seems to increase my faith more than a little bit. So think about the examples in your life and think also about the ones who showed you that God is that love, that acceptance, that welcoming, that warming, that feeding, that nourishing, all that healing. And take those lessons in. So let's share each of those lessons around because we're seeing a whole lot of the big guy with the stick. And it's informing a very unloving world that doesn't increase my faith in the leadership of this world. Let's talk.